Just to set a bit the stage, because it's important to understand also where I come from for you to understand also the difficulties. So I grew up in the period, I was a child in the period that Michel talked about, which is the Lebanese Civil War from 1975 to 1990. In the 1980s, I lived it, but very young. So I lived the war. I lived immigration as well. Immigrated for a while and we came back. I lived sheltered during this period, but I also lived as a Christian with in the back of my mind that the others were not very nice. You know, there's a war, and this war, I mean, it's about different religious communities all fighting each other. Fast forward in 2012, when I decided to quit everything, because I was a consultant at Deloitte, and to do a master's in conflict resolution, mediation, and a minor in psychology. I wanted to find an unconventional way of resolving conflict. And although the main civil war in Lebanon ended in 1990, there was a mini civil war going on in Tripoli, in the north of Lebanon. Now, to understand the context of Tripoli, you need to understand that Tripoli is not far from Syria. It's a 1 hour and a half drive away from Homs. And the Tripoli historically has been severely neglected and forgotten by the government, although it's the second largest city after the capital, Beirut. And there, two very, very large neighborhoods, one Sunni neighborhood and one Alawite neighborhood, like in Syria, were fighting a civil war even before the war in Syria started, so starting 2008. These communities were separated by one street, and they were fighting a war because of religious differences and also political differences, because they related more to Syria than they did to Lebanon, because Lebanon had forgotten them. And so when the war in Syria started, both communities also started to cross the border to fight in Syria on both sides. So with extremist groups such as ISIS and Nusra Front on the Sunni side, or with the Assad regime and Hezbollah on the Alawite side. The Islamization, deep Islamization of Tripoli was so entrenched that all the geopolitical issues had a lot of impact on Tripoli. So a lot of young men in Tripoli had previously crossed the border to fight in Iraq, to fight in Afghanistan, because they saw themselves as victims. So when I decided that I wanted to try to use theater to reconcile a group, and I thought of Tripoli because I was looking at the news and I saw these two communities and this street separating them. Every single person I know discouraged me. Everyone. Friends, families, experts in peace building, everyone. They were saying that these are very hardened ideological fighters, that first I was a woman and they were going to kill me. Second, I was a Christian and therefore I was considered an infidel, and that I was going to fail, and that even a man would fail. I was very much determined to prove them wrong, but honestly, it took me 2 years to set this up, to convince someone to give me access to these young people, going back and forth to Tripoli. I needed to find fighters from both sides who would accept to be part of a play, which is very ironic because they had never seen a play in their lives, let alone act in one. And to convince someone to fund this crazy idea, which every single donor, funder, everyone refused, ended up getting an in-kind donation very skeptically. And therefore I started to ask for help from a local national TV, come and film. This documentary was filmed pro bono with the help of a local national television station. And at the end, because I think some people there in the communities who didn't believe in this, because I think I harassed them enough that they said, okay, we're going to open auditions for you. And I ended up selecting 16 young people, 8 from each side. Even when the rehearsal started, All of them had fought. All of them saw the other as the demon, as the big enemy that he had to eliminate because the other was out to eliminate them. And so even the beginning of the rehearsals, I can tell you it was no cup of tea at all. I had to drag them out of their beds for them to come. When they came, they used to be armed. We used to search them and find razor blades under their tongues, knives in their socks, guns in their pockets. At the end of the day, these people saw each other as mortal enemies. But first, because we told them that the play was inspired by their lives, they started to share each other's stories. And they actually came, and this is something they told me after, for two reasons, one very noble one and one not so much. The first one was not because they wanted to reconcile with the other, because they hated him. They wanted to tell their part of the story. They wanted to share with the others who they really were, because they knew they were stigmatized and they believed they were in the right. And the second reason was they wanted to memorize the faces of the other so that they could then shoot them one day. And but because we told them that the play was inspired by their lives, they started to share their stories. And when they started to share their stories, they realized that they were much more alike than they thought. But I just want, because we were talking about the idea of a safe space and etc. These things were mentioned. And for me, even though after that we built a safe space and we'll talk about it, a safe physical space, the safe space is not necessarily physical. And what do we mean by a safe space? A safe space is a space where they feel they can trust and they feel that they can be themselves. And so I recalled that I'm going to share one story of somebody. I'm going to use his war name. His name is Atrice. And so he was a young man who came into the rehearsal, but very skeptically so, and he was always withdrawn. 2 weeks after the start of the rehearsal, he comes up to me very aggressively and tells me, you know what, I'm going to leave. I'm wasting your time. I'm not staying in Lebanon anyway. And I said, oh, where are you going? And he looks at me very provocatively and he says, I'm going to Syria. And I said, okay, why are you going to Syria? And he tells me, you're an infidel. You won't understand. And I said, well, try me because I'm curious to know why you're going. And he told me, I am going to go fight with the Al-Nusra Front, which is ex-HTC now that we talk about. And I ask him, why? And he tells me, because we, the Sunnis, are oppressed, and I'm going to help out my brother, and this is a religious cause. And he starts talking and talking. And then he tells me, and also it is because there I can get married and have kids. And so I look at him and I say, but why don't you get married here? And he says, well, because I'm stateless. And I'm like, but aren't you Lebanese? He says, yes, but my father was in jail when I was born. And the laws in Lebanon give you a certain period to register your child, and only the man, the dad, can do it, not the mom. And so I became stateless. And I was like, I didn't even know that existed. Can you tell me more about it? And I told him after a very big conversation, I said, you know what? I'm going to try to do something. Can you just wait it out a bit? He said, I saw many lawyers. They ripped us off. It won't work. I said, but please really let me try. And I started going back and forth to him and explaining to him, I spoke to this and I did this and etc. etc. Fast forward 10 years. Atrice is now married. He has his legal papers. He has a daughter named Leah. He waited for me to come back from the US to get married because he wanted me to accompany him to the... And when I asked him, what was the turning point for you? He tells me, you remember when we had this conversation? I said, yes. He said, I didn't even believe for 1 second that you could do it, not because you didn't want to, but because I knew it was very hard. But the fact that you didn't judge me, and you listened, and you kept on coming and going, and you were interested, and I felt something flip. I felt that there were people who genuinely wanted to help. What I want to say is that he didn't tell me, it's because you convinced me with logical arguments to stay here and not to go to Syria. Because for me, what I learned the most is that conflict is emotional. And therefore, we cannot treat and resolve conflicts by using, I don't know, processes, activities, data, whatever. It's the human element that matters. It's these personal relationships that you build out of genuine curiosity of the other. And this is how we were able with time, and I don't know if you have a follow-up question, to transform a lot of these young men, not because we actually developed a full program. Yes, we did, because we did to tackle after the play. I mean, you're going to see the play today, but this did not stop here. Uh, After the play, which was called Love and War on the Rooftop, because they told us back then that everything used to happen on rooftops. That's why we called it that. From snipers shooting at each other, to friends playing cards, or to secret love rendezvous, because there were no spaces for these young men to meet anywhere else. And I remember during the auditions, one of the young men, I was used to ask him, like, do you have a friend from the other side? And most of them said no. And this one thought, like, he said, I have one. I said, oh, really? Where did you meet him? And he tells me, in prison. And I said, but you literally live a few meters apart. Why in prison? And he looks at me very skeptically and said, where do you want us to meet? In a public park? And this was one of my aha moments, where after the play, I said, I need to open a space.
Here, if you follow, we have what? We have lack of chance to find a job. You don't have a public space. They met in jail, not in a park. And you have multiple. If you analyze it, there's really a lot to analyze. But I think that will give a space to the documentary, and after to the debate with Leah and I, if it's possible. So now Leah will go to
Bin Malouf in his book says that our identity, because it is about identity, our identity is not one layered. It's made up of multiple components. Okay, I don't know. I am a Lebanese. I am a woman. I'm a francophone. I'm also Canadian. You know, I'm a Christian. But when one of these core identities feels threatened, it overtakes all our other identities. And that's what happens in radicalization, in any type of extreme positions that we take on something, and in conflict. It is the perceived threat toward one's identity. Hate that we see is not actually the groups that hate one another. If you think about it, they're not saying, you know, I hate him. They are saying the other hates me. This is what people say, actually, if you peel it. So it's this perceived threat. And the key is to make people feel safe in their identities, so that the other identities are able to flourish again. And that's why I think, this is why one of the main root causes for me is not poverty or unemployment. These are amplifiers of conflict. The root causes are these perceived threat, the sense of injustice, the sense of victimhood. We are being oppressed. I am a victim. This is what creates conflict more
injustice. So let's talk a little bit about your cafe. You have multiple cafes. You have this one. You have
yes, we have a cafe in Beirut, actually led by Fatima here.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about these two cafes? This one I like it because it was on the demarcation line.
Yes. So this one actually has become a huge center. So the cafe in Tripoli, which idea started as, okay, we need a space for these young men to keep on, seeing each other, on uniting, on positive ideas, on learning, and on bringing other people. But also we felt that we needed to really work on the root causes of conflict. It's not enough. I mean, theater is a very nice tool, but it's not enough when you have a conflict that is so deeply entrenched, and it is not only intergenerational, but that has been also perpetrated again with so many different root causes. So what we started to do is to try and tackle every single root cause differently. And so this space started to bring in former fighters, young men who were incarcerated on terrorism charges from both sides, women from the area, because we also need to understand that in this area, women and men do not mix in public spaces. Women are shunned, are kept to their homes, and it was very important for us, and for me anyway, to have women be active in the field. And so the idea was, it was a crazy idea at the beginning. The idea was, why don't we take these instigators of conflict and they become the pacifiers? And so this space started to bring them. So obviously we offered them all the basic needs for them to feel safe. Psychological support, because these people are very poor, medical support for them and their families, legal support, because most of them still had trials going on, and they were always scared and stressed of what was going to happen. And then, as you said, because they were not only unemployed, they were unemployable. So vocational trainings, and then the most important part also teaching them how to perceive things in a certain way, how to react to things in a certain way through I give classes in universities on conflict transformation, negotiation, etc. But I've never had a group of students this interested and this motivated to learn as these young men have done. So also giving them skills to be able to, lead in their society, and having them lead on a lot of community service activities for their society, for them to feel proud that they are being able to change things in their society, and for them to have the credibility then to positively impact the others. So now we have a group of around 400 former fighters who are leading the change in their areas. And I can tell you, with what was happening geopolitically and what was happening in Syria, if they were not there, war would have broken again in Tripoli. And for me, this is what we need to leave. It's not only the sustainability of creating for them jobs and having some of them become tour hosts, and we have a tour called the Love and War Tour that we created for them, where they share their stories of love and war through a tour on the former demarcation line, or creating a design company for them to exhibit all of their products. But for me, the real sustainability is, what if we leave? They are the peace builders of tomorrow.